We're told that those who forget history are condemned to repeat it. That is why the annual commemoration, Yom HaShoah, is so important. It is important to remember and educate of the ugly, totalitarian ideology of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, which metastasized into a bloody dictatorship, a Second World War, and, as we commemorate today, possibly the most evil attempt at mass extermination of an entire people that the world has ever seen. This, along with communist socialism, brought together two twin ideologies of the 20th century that unleashed havoc and death on peoples, often for no other reason than their race, their religion, their ancestry. Over 6 million Jews were murdered in labor camps, concentration camps, and death camps. Some of the survivors are still with us today, imparting their stories and ensuring that the next generation learns those stories. It's almost 80 years now since 1945. 80 years is roughly the life expectancy in most developed countries. So it isn't by accident that memories start to fade right about now. And as these memories have faded, these same ugly totalitarian ideologies have gained favor. And with the same hateful rhetoric, and in some cases, the same precursor actions playing themselves out today. We see at university campuses the hateful anti-Jewish rhetoric directed at innocent students. We see fire bombings of Canadian synagogues, something we never would have imagined a short time ago. I know that some of you are making the heart-wrenching decision. Do I walk outside with the Star of David on my chest? Do I wear my kippah? Do I keep my mezuzah on the door? You worry about the safety of your loved ones in Canada. It is absolutely unacceptable that you should be faced with this dilemma. You must be allowed to live fearlessly and proudly Jewish lives, and it is the responsibility of every Canadian, Jewish or otherwise, to stand with your right to do that. The hatred that we see in our streets, of course, has been amplified by the genocidal attacks of Hamas on October the 7th, almost 7 months ago. This was an attempt at genocide. It was the biggest mass murder of Jews since the Holocaust. It was carried out by an organization that had full autonomous control over Gaza and enjoyed a ceasefire. It was living right next to the Jewish state, which had vacated the Gazan lands and allowed, with perhaps some retrospective, we look back on that decision and we look back at what it resulted in. It allowed the Hamas regime to make autonomous decisions in governing that land. And as of October 6th, there was a ceasefire. And then on October 7th, Hamas carried out one of the most sadistic attacks ever witnessed in human history. The only difference between the Nazis and Hamas is that while the Nazis were cowardice and in some cases attempt to cover up their evil, the Hamas terrorists bragged about it, recorded it, put it on display on social media, took sadistic delight in what it had done. To this day, Hamas has said that if it gets the chance, it will repeat the attacks of October 7th. And that is why it is incumbent on all democratic governments to state clearly that there is only one way to end this conflict, and that is for Hamas to disarm, to surrender, and to turn over the hostages. Bring them home. Here in Canada, we must do more than speak the right words. Never again requires action, real action. It is appalling that 4 years after the anti-Semitic and genocidal terrorist group, the IRGC, killed 55 Canadians in the PS 752 attack, and 7 months after that same terrorist group helped coordinate Hamas's attack on Israel, the IRGC still operates legally in Canada with 700 agents on the ground. We must immediately criminalize and list the IRGC as terrorists today. We must establish a foreign influence registry to identify all the foreign agents that foment disagreement and division on the ground, and those that work for the Iranian regime must be exposed. We must evaluate Canada's threat assessment of terrorist attacks in light of the fact that we have had terrorist attacks target Canadian schools. We must remove red tape and speed up access to the security infrastructure program so that we can defend all places of worship, Jewish and otherwise, against terrorist attacks. We must coordinate all law enforcement and intelligence bodies in one unified task force so that they can share information on imminent strikes so that those can be interrupted before they metastasize into a murderous attack. And we must condemn and defeat the ugly 20th century ideologies that are recurring again. It is worth noting that hate crimes between 2015 and 2022 had already risen by over 160%. That is before the attacks of October 7th. In the last year, anti-Semitic attacks are up over 100%. That is double. That means the Jewish people are being doubly victimized. Once with the bloodshed they witnessed in their homeland of Israel, and again on the streets and in their synagogues. This ideology, which seeks to divide people into identity groups, turn them against each other, and preach hatred between the peoples of our country, must stop. We must replace it with an identity, with an ideology that views everyone as an individual, that celebrates their personal character rather than denigrating their group identity. We must recognize that the Jewish people are always the first to be victims of this hatred, but are never the last. And the Jewish people who are here today who asked those terrible questions about whether they can display their Jewish symbols, from this Gentile, I have this message. You are not alone. You have friends. You have friends that stand with you, now and always. Friends that will stand up for Israel's right to defend itself. Friends that will stand with you against the ugly violence and hatred on our campuses and in our communities. Friends that will restore a Canada where you feel safe to espouse your faith in the security of your community. Friends who will be with you as always. I am honored to consider myself one of those friends. To the students who were part of the March of Living Committee. I did the March of the Living years ago between Auschwitz, the first concentration camp, and Birkenau, the most deadly of the death camps. And amid all the horror that history testifies in those places, I saw hope. There I saw young Jews placing stones on larger rocks, rocks acting as the replacement for tombstones that were never able to be laid, with the message to ancestors that we're here, we still love you, we haven't forgotten. Israeli flags blowing in the wind, the Star of David in the sky, as a message to the defeated Nazis: you will not stop us. We are still here. We are still Jewish. We sing the same songs, practice the same faith, on the same land as our ancestors over 3,000 years ago. The trash can of history is filled with those who have tried and failed to destroy the Jewish people. And once again, the Jewish people will triumph. Your friends will stand with you in this triumph, and we will say loudly, here and everywhere, never again. Thank you.